So in this video for Hatshepsut, we'll be having a look at Hatshepsut's relationship, or rather the king's relationship to the god Amun during this time period, which is quite complex, but it helps us to understand some of the new things that Hatshepsut introduced, and also helps us inform cultural understandings of Egypt at this time, as well as religious and political understandings about the Egyptians and particularly the king's role during this time period. So it's probably best if we start with the god Amun himself, and we see an image of Amun here depicted as a man, and that's really important. And you see it even looks like a king in that it's wearing the kilt and has the beard as well. But what we notice with Amun is that we see two feather plumes coming out of the hat, and that's how we know that it's Amun. So Amun began as a local god of Thebes, which, as we know, is where these Egyptian kings from the 17th dynasty who reunified Egypt came from. So it was one of their local gods and had been worshipped there for centuries, and that's where he came from. But when they expelled the Hyksos, and what happened was these Theban kings determined that Amun would become the state god, the god worshipped throughout a unified Egypt as the main god. And one of the ways that they did this without causing too much of a stir amongst other areas was they made a composite god with Amun and the god Ra, which is the sun god, which doesn't have a direct representation. We don't really see representations of what the sun god looked like because it was just the sun. And that was the state god that was worshipped during the Old Kingdom period. So they kind of eased that transition into a new state god by having a composite god called Amun Ra. The image you can see there is another composite god, just to make it even more confusing, which is called Ra Horakte, and we can see that solar disk there on top of Horus's head. And that indicates that that's the sun god aspect of it, or the Ra god aspect of Horus, to form a new god called Ra Horakte. And sometimes we will see Amun Ra with the two plumes, feathers, as well as that solar disk as well. But oftentimes Amun is just represented wearing the two plumes and just as a man rather than any other way. The reason that it was so important for Amun to be worshipped as a man was because it allowed these kings in the New Kingdom period in the 18th dynasty to form a really physical relationship with Amun, because they looked like Amun. They could depict themselves wearing similar clothes to Amun and in relationships with Amun in reliefs, as you can see in this image here with Amun on the left-hand side crowning a king. So the king's relationship with Amun, the king attempted to really promote their relationship to Amun because it made them very close and almost like a deity themselves because of their close relationship to Amun, which gave them obviously the trust of the people and the support of the people. And this was achieved by having inscriptions and reliefs on walls. And you can see an inscription here where the king has offered to Amun these two obelisks which have been built for him. And indeed, Amun had asked for these to be built for him. And this is very common during this time period where we see these kinds of inscriptions done. So Amun would often command the king to conduct military campaigns and to engage in trade, or to engage in building programs, and these would often then be dedicated back to Amun as a way of demonstrating support for Amun and worshipping Amun. So Hatshepsut continued along with this tradition, but also built upon it herself, and many of the things that Hatshepsut did continued after her reign and were continued by later pharaohs, indicating how important she was to building up the king's relationship to Amun during this time period. So she implemented brand new ways of worshipping with Amun. One of those was to depict herself as literally the daughter of Amun. So she used, and we've got another video on this later on, but what's called the divine birth scenes at her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, where she depicted her mother, Queen Ahmose, being impregnated by the god Amun himself, and then being obviously born from Amun, so demonstrating that she was literally the daughter or the son of Amun. Which is quite unique in this time period and was continued by later kings later, obviously solidifying that relationship between the king and Amun, and also demonstrating to the people that Hatshepsut, it was Amun's will that Hatshepsut be the king and reign. We also see Hatshepsut's becoming a king foretold on the walls of her mortuary temple too. So, of the Red Chapel, not her mortuary temple. So we see the king actually, Amun, foretelling the fact that Hatshepsut would become the next king. We've got a little excerpt of that there. Welcome, my sweet daughter, my favourite, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Ma'at Kare. Hatshepsut, thou art the pharaoh taking possession of the two lands. So that was the foretelling of, or the oracle of Hatshepsut becoming king prior to her becoming king, if that makes sense. So this was Amun, therefore it's Amun's will that Hatshepsut should become king because he has foretold it will be so. So there's a little bit of an overview of Hatshepsut's relationship to Amun during this time period and the king's relationship with Amun.